What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Steelers Breakdown Podcast. Nick Farabaugh here. We're finishing out our first week of the podcast, of course, and I want to switch over to training camp focused stuff. We've talked a little bit about the general feeling around this football team, some other stuff like Arthur Smith, Brandon Ayuk, but I want to talk about the top five position battles that I'm looking out for, specifically at training camp. And I'm not going to include the quarterback competition. We'll talk about that a little bit after I get through these top five because I think that's its own separate kind of jar. It's a complete box that has its own nuances, and we talked a little bit about that, of course, in the first episode with John and I. But first of all, I want to get right into this. The biggest, in my opinion, competition to watch is at right tackle and left tackle, and I include both tackle spots because I believe Dan Moore Jr., Troy Falatanu, and Broderick Jones are battling. I think Jones is guaranteed to be in the starting lineup. I don't really think there's a question for me or you that is listening that Broderick Jones will start. He'll start either at left tackle or right tackle, but it depends on where. He's played both this offseason. In the spring, they were playing him at both, and I wouldn't say it favored either side. I thought it was pretty split, which tells me that they truly don't know who's going to start yet. Now, Dan Moore Jr. hasn't played any right tackle yet, and Troy Falatanu has not played any left tackle yet. Do we see that change in the summer? I think that's going to be a very important question to answer. Does Dan Moore try to give it a shot over it, right? Because listen, Omar Khan at the NFL Combine last year, when I asked him, listen, what's Broderick Jones's future? Is it at right tackle? Is it left tackle? He said he was drafted to be a left tackle. That's his future with the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's a left tackle of the future. Now, whether that's this year, some point in the middle of this year, next year, it's up to them. But they drafted Troy Falatanu to replace Dan Moore. There's no hiding that. That's exactly why he was drafted. He was drafted to give him a whole new tackle situation. And so Troy Falatanu is going to have to pick things up really quickly. I thought he got better over the spring, so I'm really excited to see him in the summer. I expect him to play more at right tackle. I think, Broderick Jones will play at right tackle if Dan Moore wins the job. I truly don't expect a ton of Dan Moore at right tackle. I'm sure he'll give it a shot because they're going to want him to, especially if he's the top backup. I also think, though, this opens up the door for a Dylan Cook to come up and kind of rise up out of the shadows. He's a guy that I thought was really good last year. He play everything but center along the line. They've trained him at both guard spots and both tackle spots, so he's a good swing tackle. And I think he's a guy that has versatility. And so Falatanu wins the job. And listen, I'm going to think he is gonna because I think Trey Falatanu comes into camp super polished and ready to go. I love his athleticism. I love his football smarts. I think he's really going to transition there. And Pat Meyer said to me that Troy Falatanu coming out of Washington told him he was more comfortable on the right side. He played right tackle in high school. He also played right tackle during practices at Washington, not in games. He only played on the left side, left tackle or left guard. So it's his first time doing this in a while, but I think he got better, and I think he's going to be a guy that is probably going to start week one. Dan Moore's going to fight for it, and I respect Dan Moore and what he does. As a teammate stepping up to help a guy like Falatano helping Jones last year, like credit to him. Not everybody would do that, but what I really look at this team and think about the style of runs they want to run. Think about the athleticism they have across the offensive line. I think Falatano fits that. I think he's going to be a really good player for them. So I expect him to win, but we'll see. I think if he does win, it opens up the door to a Dan Moore trade. We'll see what happens there, but I think that is very possible. The other one, I think the second one that I'm really going to be watching, wide receiver. I think this is another big one. That's wide receiver two and wide receiver three. We talk about, this 11 personnel that they run. They don't run a ton of it. We talked about that yesterday in the Arthur Smith episode, how this is 12, 13 personnel, 22, 21. They run a ton of that. But there is still 11 personnel, and you obviously need different body types in this offense if you're going to win deep, if you're going to win over the middle. You're going to need a big body to block. So there's going to be different roles, and each battle's going to have different looks. Who's going to be the true one, two, though? I think the true one is obviously going to be George Pickens. But if a trade doesn't come, and right now it hasn't, I know they're interested in one and they want to try and get somebody, but it hasn't manifested itself yet, right? Two to tango. So they need two to tango. They haven't found that partner yet. So let's say they don't find somebody to trade. Maybe they sign somebody off the street, but they're maybe not going to be wide receiver two instantly. Who kind of comes out of that battle? Is it Van Jefferson, who's a guy that had a very productive year in 2021, winning down the football field? He's a tough player. He blocks, a high effort player, has very good hands, but kind of reminiscent to me a little bit of Allen Robinson from last year. Short-handed guy that tries really hard but doesn't really get open a ton. That's kind of what I feel like. I see with Van Jefferson, a little bit more route running prowess because I think Allen Robinson's lost a lot of juice. I think Van Jefferson's lost a ton of it. So you'll see him get open a little bit more, but he's kind of a rich man's version of that version of Allen Robinson. So, Allen Robinson got like 250, 300 yards last year. Maybe Van Jefferson, if he was wide receiver two, would get, 400, 500, somewhere around there. Roman Wilson, rookie, another rookie, that we're looking out for. Roman Wilson, man, is just a speedy dot across the field. He can win all over the middle of the field. It's, can he play outside right away? I think he's got the profile to do it. It's not the size, but he has the speed and certainly the quickness, the athletic tools to do it. But when physicality hits him, he's a little bit still, hesitant to meet it. He tries a ton, and he's a hard nosed player. He'll bring it in the run game, but when guys get hands on him in the pass game, it can disrupt his timing a little bit. I'd like to see him, get some nuances in the route running department a little bit more, and kind of work on his game off the line of scrimmage. So we'll see how that kind of works out. He didn't have a great spring, but I think he has a real good shot to bounce back from it. I've seen guys that looked like Roman Wilson in the spring. Joey Porter Jr., for instance, last year, he struggled in the spring and even early in training camp. And then obviously we saw what happened with Joey Porter Jr. Roman Wilson feels like a guy to me that's like right on that doorstep of hitting it. He was close to making a few big plays. So I think he's definitely an option. And then you have guys, Calvin Austin, Quez Watkins, Scotty Miller, even. Calvin Austin was easily the wide receiver two in the spring. I want to see that carry over. His route running looks great. I'm just not sure how much of a high volume target he is. Quez Watkins is a deep threat, and so is Scotty Miller. So we'll see what happens there. And then you have other guys like Des Fitzpatrick and Marquez Callaway and others to factor in to that race. Another one that I'm really interested in is slot corner. And we've talked about slot cornerback a little bit too. Cam Sutton, his suspension is going to force them to find a slot cornerback for the first 8 games of the season. He will not return until they go to Washington, D.C. But it really kind of changes the profile of this defense without, a certain guy in there. It could be 2 guys. I mean, it really could. They could split this up. I think Deshaun Elliott, for first of all, is going to have a role here. I think he's going to be the rundown nickel. Remember, Minka was playing a lot there last year in that rundown nickel role. I expect Deshaun Elliott to take on that role this season. But who's going to be the other guy? There's a few contenders. Graylin Arnold, Josiah Scott, Beanie Bishop, Thomas Graham. All 4 of those guys I just named took significant snaps in the slot in the spring. I think Beanie Bishop was the best of them. Arnold didn't really do a ton. He got signed pretty late, so I'm interested to see there. He's got a ton of experience, played with the Texans, great special teamer. So he's a guy that could actually really mix up this competition. I'm interested to see what he does. Scott started for the Eagles in 2022 in the slot. Struggled in coverage. He's a downhill guy. He's tough, pretty fearless. Beanie Bishop is fearless and a ball hawk. I thought Beanie Bishop had a great spring. I really want to see kind of what he can do throughout training camp and the preseason. If he can carry his performances in the spring into games and into padded practices, I think he has a real good shot to win this job. I really do. It's wide open. And Thomas Graham, he's a pretty savvy veteran. So what happens here at slot cornerback is going to be very, very important. Another position that I'm really looking towards is the defensive line depth. So your 3 stars are going to be Cam Hayward, Larry Ogunjobi, and Keanu Benton. But behind them, I think you have 2 guys that are almost locks to make the roster. I think Dane Lowry and Montravius Adams will both make this roster. For one, I think they're the next best 2 defensive linemen, regardless of it. But who else makes that? Isaiah Loudermilk, I thought, had probably a better season than people are giving him credit for. He really took a step in his run defense last year, got stronger, looked the part, looked like the game finally slowed down for him. It looked like it clicked for him. I think if I had to pick who the 6th best guy would be, I would pick him right now. So I think, I think a lot of people are saying, he could be on the outs. I think Laudermilk makes this team. And then you have two other names in there. You have Logan Lee and you have DeMarvin Leal. Leal, third round pick from 2 years ago. It's just never clicked with them. They've kind of messed with his position. He's been a tweener, told him to train as a tweener. No, you're a five tech. No, you're an edge. You're both. Never really has been able to settle into one body type, one position. It's hard his development because he was a guy coming out of Texas A&M that was this tweener type and needed to settle in somewhere, and he never really has, and that's really hurt his development. And it feels like now they're full in on him on the interior, which I think is his right spot. But how does he look in camp? Logan Lee, one of the late round picks, high motor guy, solid athlete as well. We'll see kind of how he performs. Then you have Brian Fajoko on top of that, as this big run plug he knows. So I'm interested to see how that kind of works out. So that's my number 4 battle. My 5th battle that I'm very fascinated to watch, personally at least, is this center competition. And I say center competition, and that's because Zach Frazier has not yet locked up the job. I think he will start. I think naturally, it's kind of like Troy Falatanu too. I think Troy Falatanu will start. Nate Herbig though took the first team reps, so this is a battle. It's going to be a battle. First day of camp. Don't be surprised if there's reports of Nate Herbig taking the first team reps at center. They're going to make Zach Frazier earn it, but he's a smart kid. Talk about him. How his wrestling background really shows up in the angles he takes, the leverage he plays with, how he turns guys in short spaces. It really shows up for him. He's a really smart guy that conducts an offense already. You can kind of see the leadership qualities. He was a captain of West Virginia. I expect him to win that job, but anytime a rookie like that's involved and you're banking on that rookie to be a big part of the improvement of your offense, you better look at that kid and kind of see what is brewing there. So we'll see what Zach Frazier can do in training camp. Let's talk about that other battle I mentioned, Justin Fields and Russell Wilson. And the first question is this a battle? I think it is to a degree. And by that, what I mean is I do think that they'll earnestly look at Justin Fields, and if he just plays flat up better, he'll get the job. I do think that is true. But I think that they believe Russell Wilson's going to be the better of the two. I think he was in the spring. I think you watch film from last year, and man, you can argue Fields was better. I don't think it's crazy if you believe that. I think the film from last year with Chicago, they both had their weaknesses, right? Both run into sacks, both can be turnover prone. Fields throws picks and fumbles. Wilson more so fumbles. Only had 8 picks last year, so he was pretty risk averse. Checked down a lot, and Fields is certainly more dynamic with his legs. The 35-year-old Russell Wilson. So there's pros and cons. Both have great deep balls. You look at Justin Fields' deep ball, and I don't think people quite realize how good his deep ball is yet. Russell Wilson's deep ball is still elite. So there's pros and cons to both these guys. I think Wilson's more accurate. I think he's probably a better processor. I think that's probably going to end up separating him, at least even in this environment. If Fields can't significantly separate himself from Russell Wilson, I just have a hard time seeing him start, and that's really where it comes down to. But the other thing, with Justin Fields is, even if that is the case, and I think it will be the case, you can use this as a mentorship opportunity, and the leash on Russ isn't very long. He could be the starter week 1, but there's no reason for them to have that long leash because they have no loyalty to either one of these guys, right? Russell Wilson's here on the veteran minimum. Justin Fields is here on a 1-year deal too. So their chief goal this year at that quarterback position is figure out if either one of these guys could be something for the future, and if they can help it, who gives us the best chance to win this year. So that's really what that's going to come down to. So Russell Wilson's still in pole position. The guy I probably expect to win the battle. But again, just because he wins the battle in training camp, I don't think means that much. Doesn't mean Justin Fields ain't touching the field this year. In fact, I think he probably does for a few games this season. All right, folks, we'll be back on Monday. We will ramp it up towards training camp. Training camp going to obviously really, really come quickly. They report next Wednesday. They practice on Thursday. When that happens, we'll have all the coverage here on PennLive. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, turn on the notification bell for new episodes and videos, especially as the live coverage ramps up. Make sure to head over to the website, PennLive, writing stories over there every day. Nick Farabaugh. Thanks for listening, guys.